You wouldn't believe it. He chose to return to the lab, and thus the quirky duo of the blood vessel expert and the scalpel was born. The professor's personality was as sharp as a surgical knife. Thomas was as delicate as an intricate vascular tool right in their 12th year of collaboration. Finally, success in traumatic shock research, saving countless lives more amazing than the Easter Bunny. Their technique even reached the battlefield, saving many severely wounded soldiers. Even generals rushed back to celebrate with the professor. Same surgery head at med school, the professor gained fame, fortune, and made big money. However, at the celebration dinner, they didn't even mention Thomas' contributions, as if he were a ghost, since back then, black people were not valued at. Thomas had to show up as a waiter. Even though he didn't get any applause, he still loved this job, because the knowledge he gained and the research he did were way more meaningful than those fancy titles. His wife couldn't understand his choice. She knew he had amazing woodworking skills and could earn 3 times as much as an assistant. Why put himself through the torture when even daily expenses at home were a big headache? But Thomas didn't give up. He trudged down the road to his dreams like a marathoner on a mission. In the lab, he had to face the security's please leave, even when the professor stepped in to remind them. But it was no use, as this was the old rule at Hopkins, and the professor was powerless. The professor could only agree to meet Thomas in the lab, but no matter how tough it got, the brave Thomas wouldn't be thrown off course. His dream was to contribute to medicine, daydreaming about his portrait being hung on the wall. Yet discrimination and prejudice were like pesky mosquitoes that just wouldn't let him be. One day, a white doctor mistook him for a janitor and ordered him to fetch a coffee. Apparently, in their eyes, black people were only cut out for low-level jobs. Thank goodness not everyone was so judgmental. Dr. Helen Taussig was happy to chat with Thomas. She was a legend in the field of cardiology. They had met at the professor's celebration, discussing heart issues and hoping for a miracle. Thomas quickly pinpointed the cause of the disease, leaving a lasting impression on Dr. Taussig. She sincerely invited the professor to join the research on the rare condition, and he gladly accepted. Little did they know, this decision would open a new chapter in medicine, but the babies' hearts were incredibly fragile. They first had to replicate the symptoms in puppies, but baby blood vessels were just 3 minus 4 millimeters, making it a Herculean task. If they used current medical equipment, the result was destined to be a grand failure. Suddenly, the professor had a light bulb moment, asking the woodworking savvy Thomas to build the instruments. Little did he realize Thomas had to work in the lab not just to make a living. His wife, seeing his struggle, suggested he find another job. But in this case, who would be there to take care of the children? Life was turning out to be pretty rough. Thomas could only comfort his wife, but reality was a mountain of trouble. After 3 months of research, they not only hadn't produced results, but the puppies were dwindling. The professor suggested trying a new approach and doing something smart. Thomas had a light bulb moment and quickly made a breathing machine. The professor looked at him in amazement, even questioning if he really did this. Just then, Dr. Rummel happened to visit the professor, utterly shocked at the sight. Thomas was performing surgery on a dog with his eyes closed, leaving Rummel speechless. It was like coming home in the dark and recognizing your own room. Rummel looked at him with admiration and said he looked forward to working together. It turned out that skill was the best way to earn respect, but that didn't apply to small-minded people. One day in the cafeteria, a lady gave Thomas an extra hot dog, and a nearby fat guy couldn't help but laugh. He told Thomas, even in a white coat, he was no different, and he actually had 2 more years of experience. Thomas didn't understand job rankings, so he rushed to HR for confirmation. After several confirmations, he discovered he was just a lowly maintenance worker. At that very moment, the professor's joke completely ignited his intense anger. Subtitles: I was merely making a joke. Best of luck. Just like how I spend $16 every week. The professor was so focused on his research that he had no idea about Thomas' identity. However, just as Thomas left, Dr. Rommel shouted for the professor. The puppy's blood oxygen values had actually hit the mark. Thomas had done it. The professor regretted not keeping him around and hurriedly wanted Thomas back in the lab.